Good morning and welcome to the VIP seat. Today is August 29th, and this week's top stories in private aviation include charter flights to Burning Man and how the new CEO of Starbucks' 1,000-mile commute is actually a great investment. Your hosts today include yours truly, Jesse Naor, and our co-host, Andrew Schmertz, Hopscotch Air. So buckle up, sit back, and let's take off. All right, Andrew. So this week there was a lot of hoopla about the new Starbucks CEO, Brian Niccol. Not only did he get almost a $113 pay package, but it also included $250,000 of personal travel on the company jets. This obviously enraged a lot of environmentalists and employees. But what are your thoughts on this initially?
So I think we agree, because we're both in the charter business, that the private jet aspect of it is not such a big deal. So I know environmentalists are unhappy, but there's very little environmental impact that has been proven time and time again. Using a private plane for a high net worth VIP individual can be appropriate. However, I do think that the optics for Starbucks doesn't look great. So first they say, well, this is consistent with our remote work policy. Yes, but people who work remote and then show up to the office take their car or walk to work or take the subway. Not many people are taking a private jet. I think it's more of akin to when the automakers, the auto CEOs, remember back in the day when they went to Washington begging for a handout, they came on their private jets. I think honestly, while this guy is very accomplished and probably is a great hire, and pay him whatever you want to pay him, and I realize that he's sort of paying for the private jet out of his salary, but we know that it was kind of worked in. I don't think the optics look great for Starbucks, honestly. If he wants the job, if he wants to work for Starbucks, he should probably move to Seattle. But that being said, I think the uproar over using the private jet is misplaced. He is probably worth it. He worked at, I think, at Chipotle before. He turned
Yeah.
around Chipotle. Starbucks is counting on him to turn it around. But Starbucks' image has always been sort of a green company,
Yeah.
a progressive company. And the optics, I don't think, look great. I think the employees have a point. It's not a substantive point, but it's an optics point.
Yeah, and I think, that's a great point that, I mean, the company is founded in Seattle, very strong ties to Seattle still, and kind of that identity. At the same time, I look at Starbucks has had three different CEOs in the last 2 years. They're
Mm-hmm.
not doing great. And he came from Chipotle where he doubled revenues, he increased the stock value by 800%. The guy is a rock star, when it comes to turning companies around. I think, at least from the investor point of view, and I think the stock price went up like 25% after they announced that he was coming on board in the
Yeah,
first place.
he's a great hire. But if you want to turn around the company, you got to do a few things. If you go in and order a cup of coffee, hand you the coffee while they're online. Don't make you wait 5 minutes just to pour the coffee. I understand if you order some fancy cappuccino, latte, mocha thingy that they need to make that you could wait for. But
Yeah.
coffee and iced coffee, that's what I like. I like iced coffee. Just pour the iced coffee, give it to me. Dunkin' Donuts has this problem too. Dunkin' Donuts is doing the same thing. I wait online, I order an iced coffee, get my receipt, and then I have to wait another 5 minutes for them to pour the iced coffee. And they've convinced me not only to do that, but to pay $5.50 for it. So I think his first task has to be getting to, make the coffee for the everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
You've already established that you could charge an outrageous amount for coffee. In New York City, you can get a cup of coffee on the corner for $1.50 from the guy at the stand, or you can go into Starbucks, and people go to Starbucks, and there's a Starbucks every block. So
Yeah.
that's been established, but they have to improve the restaurant experience for the people who are just going in and out. And I know that they're cutting back on, people who sit there all day on their computer, all of that. I don't think that's an issue for Starbucks. So I think he needs to focus on the nuts and bolts of the organization. And, we should give him a pass probably for using a corporate jet, but I think still the optics are a little messy.
Yeah. Well, just for the record, they did clarify later that he's going to live in Seattle. He will have a home in Seattle. He is just entitled to use the jet as he would like to,
And
which is
that's
not
fine.
uncommon. Yeah.
And that's fine. That's a perk that CEOs and C-suite people at major corporations should get, because there's a security risk with having them fly on commercial airlines. I don't think commercial airlines want them on board either. So that's appropriate.
Yeah,
And
it
that's
was
better
just
messaging than the way they messaged it from the beginning.
yeah, and I think too, like someone picked up on, I'm sure this, I know there are like labor disputes ongoing inside of Starbucks. I'm sure someone saw
Sure.
that SEC filing and
Yeah.
in the job offer. They went immediately, he's not going to live here. He's flying by private jet. Let's attack him. You know, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the other. And man, it was all over the news. Like Google
All
private
over.
jets this week, and it's every single story that
Yeah.
came out. It was
And people
crazy.
need to recognize that those kind of images are going to get the stories because that's the headlines.
Right.
You know, the super wealthy get these perks while the baristas in the Starbucks stores aren't going to be flying that often on the private jet. But it is completely appropriate that he has access to a private jet. It is not just a fringe benefit. It is a security issue. It is a convenience issue. It's a time issue. You're paying this guy a lot of money if he's
Yeah.
successful. I think most of his money is based on performance compensation. And he needs to be sort of protected from flying on Spirit Airlines.
He needs to get where he's going. You know, that's
Yes.
slightly important for these executives whose time is money. But that's a good transition into speaking of, you know, flying on Spirit. Maybe one day your Spirit flight may not have a pilot on it. That's at least what
Well, they
certain
would like
companies
that.
certain companies are trying to do right now. XWing, who was recently acquired by Joby, just completed their third autonomous flight in a Caravan, Cessna 208B Grand Caravan. With the United States Air Force. This has been an ongoing partnership. This is not new. It's part of the Agile Flag 24 mission, but they're continuing to prove out this concept. And I think it was very smart of Joby to acquire XWing because they're clearly becoming a leader in this autonomous flight area, which is a fascinating world. Do you think we're going to be seeing any pilotless airplanes on Spirit anytime soon?
Taking passengers, humans? No. And I don't even think people's pets. I think that there's going to be, there's going to be acceptance, public acceptance, I think, coming for electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft with a pilot. I think that's coming. But I think it's a little bit too much of a hill to climb to get into a pilotless airplane. People are not getting into driverless taxis. You know, in San
Right.
Francisco, San Francisco Google, I think, is doing a big study, and that's one of the issues. I don't think there's going to be public acceptance of that. However, the first acceptance you're going to get is packages because they're already being delivered by drone. And basically, a pilotless airplane is a drone, right? So you're going to get packages delivered. That's going to reduce those costs. You're probably going to get military applications because the military is already using drones. So why not add that to the mix? But I personally don't think people are going to get on. You know, I'll give you an example. I take the JFK Air Train, which is an air train that connects Long Island Railroad Station and Jamaica Queens to the airport. That train is a drone. There is no person inside the train manning that. And I'll tell you, I get nervous by that because, that thing can go speeding off the rails at any given moment. And I think that you put that equation into an aircraft, even though airplanes are highly automated as well right now, you
Right.
do want a human in there to interact in an emergency. Even though the computer probably is making the right decision most of the time, you want that interaction with a human. So I don't think we're going to see pilotless passenger planes in the next 20 years.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it'll be
I could be
interesting
wrong.
to see. I think at one point though, like back in the day, they probably thought flight engineers would never come out of the cockpit. You know, it used to be
Sure.
three pilots in every cockpit. You know,
Yes.
what? Only two? That's crazy.
And there's
Mhm.
also a pushback on the single pilot, right? Because the
Right,
airlines are trying single pilot operations. And
right,
obviously ALPA, the airline union, pushes back against that. And that's a reasonable
right.
position for the union. I think that public acceptance, because that's where it works, right? You don't need to just build the machine. You don't need to just build the infrastructure. If you don't have public acceptance, you don't have a business. And I think
Yeah.
public acceptance is going to be a while to get there. It is possible, however, that you will get drones. I'll call them drones because I think that's what they are. Pilotless aircraft, sort of a very short hop.
Hmm.
So you might get something from the east side of Manhattan to the west side. That I could see existing.
Well, in a
You know,
highly controlled,
a
this pathway
highly,
right here. Yeah.
yes, yeah, a highly controlled environment.
Yeah.
But I
I
don't
will
think
say,
anybody's flying to Europe.
no, not yet. I mean, if it comes to a personal choice, and this is saying that one day the FAA has certified it and that it's safe and it's proven out technology wise, I would be comfortable with single pilot and a highly autonomous aircraft. Just me personally, I would get on that aircraft. Now, will the general public? I don't know. But I do think, look, you look at accident statistics, like human error, that's just part of human nature and other things. But also there's human error in the programming and the technologies as well.
Yeah, to your point, I think passengers will get on to anything that it costs them less money. And we see that in the airline industry, right? There's a race to the bottom. People
Right.
are willing to be uncomfortable, poor customer service, fly to Florida for $65. They could suck it up and do that. But
Yeah.
the additional step of not having a pilot on board, I think you have to incentivize people beyond that
Yeah.
to get them to do.
Other than, oh, it's cool, let's do it this one time.
That's right. That's right.
Speaking of cool, now, and this is not normally a part of private aviation conversations, but I think increasingly it's becoming so. You can fly privately to space. The billionaire Jared Isaacman, who was the first person or the first private crew member to fly on the SpaceX Crew Dragon back in 2021, was supposed to do a spacewalk this week. They are still planning on departing. I believe there was a helium leak on Tuesday, and then yesterday there was also a delay for weather. So maybe later this month they will actually be departing, but it's the first commercial spacewalk that's taking flight. The mission's called Polaris Dawn. Pretty cool. And I
Yeah,
don't know, would you be buying a ticket if
absolutely.
you could?
Absolutely. I'm all for this because this is kind of what adventure is about. This is basically a Disney World e-ticket back when they had e-tickets, right?
In
It's
space.
the best e-ticket you could buy. And it does push, there is some scientific valid information coming from it. It does push the boundaries of space exploration.
Mhm.
People used to be able to, well, people they can sail across the Atlantic Ocean, right? And if you can do that, and back in the day, right, you needed to have a lot of money to do that. If you could do that, why can't you go to space? So if you could afford to, I'm all for it. I think it excites people who don't do that. They say it's aspirational. They say, I want to do that. And that's
Right.
aspirational. And I'm fine with that. There are risks, obviously, but there's risks with anything. I remember William Shatner went up, I think, was it Elon Musk's, was it SpaceX, I believe it was? Or no, it was Amazon. Blue Origin, I think.
Oh,
I think,
yes. Yeah.
I
Blue
think,
Origin.
I
Yep.
think, I think William Shatner, and that was great because everybody knows William Shatner. They know him as the captain of the Starship Enterprise. He
Yeah.
got to actually go to space for real. That was an incredible experience for everybody watching that, and I
Yeah.
think that's beneficial to the space program and beneficial to all of us.
It's also interesting because they're going to be going 600 miles farther than the International Space Station, and that's going to be right in the Van Allen belts. And I know we landed on the moon, and there are people who say that we don't, and it makes me so angry. And one of their
Well,
arguments is, well, what about all the radiation and the Van Allen belts? And like, they're going to be there for 5 days. So I think this will be more evidence than ever that yes, we went to
now
the
we actually
moon.
went to the moon. Yeah, yeah.
You
There
can't
are
argue
questions.
it.
There are questions. I mean, why is it so hard for us to go back to the moon? We did it a number of times,
Right.
but there's a whole bunch of, I think NASA says because we need to make it like almost 100% safe and to go back there. But you're right. It creates a atmosphere where exploration is more understood
Mhm.
and more attainable.
Well, and I love honestly that this guy Jared Isaacman, billionaire, created a payment processing program where most of his money came from. But he's obviously a huge aviation enthusiast. He has his own private air force. It's the
Mhm.
Draken International Company. He flies a MiG-28, the only one in the U.S. He's obviously someone who wants to push the limits and knows the value of space exploration and how that can impact the world. But it's also going to be benefiting St. Jude's. The last mission that they did a few years ago, they actually raised $250 million for St. Jude's Hospital. They're doing the same again with this. Beyond just the cool factor of him getting to walk in space, I think it's doing a lot of good for the
Yeah, it
humanity.
benefits a lot of people.
Right.
And look, it's safer than taking a man-made sub to the Titanic. Because
Yeah.
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Serious people are working on the machinery to get
Yes.
these people to space, and it would be a high-profile disaster if something happened. like it did with the Titan sub.
Yeah.
And I think people look at the Titan sub and look at space. I think space is space. I would go to space quicker than I would go down to the Titanic.
I have heard that from people who have worked on submarines, that
Yeah,
it's a very scary world down there. You just
it
don't
is.
realize it.
People don't belong down there.
No, no, they don't.
There's a
That's
reason
for
you're on
fish
land.
with weird lights on the front of their faces.
That's right.
But speaking of not belonging, I don't know if I belong at Burning Man this year, but people are
Hmm.
again going. Not my cup of tea personally, but it seems to have a big draw.
I've always been fascinated by Burning Man. I never really understood what it is, but it draws people I know from around the world of all political sizes and shapes.
Yeah.
It's I don't even know what goes on at Burning Man, but I do want to go
Drugs
sometime, I
and
think.
rock and roll and art
Yeah,
and some of those things.
yeah. Now that goes on every day in New York City. So
Yeah, but not always like right out in public. It's sometimes behind closed doors there. But this year is a little different because they used to allow some charter flights into their airfield, which is 88 November Victor. But this year they have their own airline. They're calling it the Burner Air Express. And it's interesting because when I try to go online and book a seat, this is Miss Jessie likes to follow the rules and used to be an operator. I don't see who's actually operating the flights. And I don't know if all consumers know that when you go to a website and you're trying to book an airplane, particularly something that's like a scheduled airline service, you need to know who's operating that airplane.
yeah.
So whoever the organizers are, if anyone listens to this, you should maybe go check that out because it's
Well,
not
I think the people going to Burning Man aren't really paying attention to most of the rules on anything.
true.
So I don't know how much that's going to resonate. But
Probably not.
we know it's a big issue. I'm going to assume that they are using certificated operators to get this.
When I started to dig deeper, they are using a 135 company. But again, they're selling seats, which I didn't see in the DOT's list of prospectuses. That's like industry jargon right there. But basically, if you're going to
Yeah,
sell by the seat, you can't just do it. You actually have to file something with the Department of Transportation saying that when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it. Because this is something consumers don't necessarily know is that 135 is different than the airlines. The rules are different. They are less restrictive. And that's not something that I think the common consumer knows or understands, but they should.
probably.
But yeah, so Burning Man's open. They've got two 6,000-foot runways. It's on a dry lake bed, and they have to water it every night to make sure that airplanes can land the following day.
And if you fly your own plane, and you have to, I believe, the plane in like saran wrap entirely because the sand and dust gets into it and will just destroy the aircraft.
Yeah, I saw some pictures yesterday of just that and duct tape, and I'm like, well, I hope you get all that stuff off before you take off on that airplane the next day.
And make sure your insurance covers, trips to Burning Man.
Yeah, how does that work?
Exactly.
But anyway, so if you're planning on flying privately this week to Burning Man, you better make sure you know if you can get into 88 November Victor or not, and if not, you might end up hitchhiking on somebody's van on the way. So enjoy.
Yeah.
So, in our last story of the day, this is one full of twists and turns. There was a international repossession of a Global 6000. Originally, the aircraft was owned by Dan Etete, who was the former Nigerian Minister of Oil, who apparently made himself $350 million by selling some rights to an oil field, which then the government obviously didn't like that.
Standard operating
Scandalous.
procedure in Nigeria.
Yeah, but essentially it was taken back by the Nigerian government, and then the airplane was in Canada, and there's a Chinese investment group who was granted an arbitration against the country of Nigeria, and now they have taken that airplane back. It's one of many to come, apparently, in the next couple weeks. But man, fun doing business in Nigeria. That's a little complicated.
Yeah, so I know Nigeria very well. I've been there multiple times. The people are wonderful, by the way. They're absolutely wonderful. And the country has exploded in wealth. It is now Africa's largest economy. And with that, private aviation has also exploded in wealth. But that is a problem in Nigeria, corruption. And, this guy flew around he had a Global, I guess, around on a Global for as long as he got away with it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that they caught the guy and took the plane.
Yeah. Well,
and there probably will be more seizures.
Well, but now the complicated part is that, this is all related back to there was another free trade zone that these Chinese investors had invested in, and then the government apparently took that right back from them or something along those lines. Quite complicated. But now these investors have an arbitration against the Nigerian government, and not only are they talking about taking away, airplanes that were possessed by Nigeria, but even the presidential aircraft. And so he just closed on a Boeing. No, no, no. He got an Airbus. He just got an A330. They have a BBJ 737. His home could be targeted. I mean, they're talking about seizing assets of all of top government officials across the board. That's
So
pretty wild.
that is pretty wild. China has become very aggressive in investments throughout the continent, and specifically in Nigeria, because the United States has pulled back over the last 8 to 10 years, pulled back investments in Africa and in Nigeria. And so there was an opening for the Chinese to walk in there. And, there's an argument that the Chinese don't care so much about environmental rules and labor costs and labor rules and all that. And so they saw an opportunity. They've invested a lot of money, and that's probably where this is coming. There's a friction point there. I don't think government officials should have a global express at their fingertips. The president needs a presidential airplane. The vice president needs a vice
Yes.
presidential airplane. But I don't think ministers, and I think this guy was a minister, you have to
Yeah.
wonder, how did he have all this money to buy this aircraft?
Well, he got $350 million in a
Well,
kickback,
that
on
in a
selling
kickback,
this oil field. And then, the $57 million for the global, chump
not so
change.
much. Yeah, yeah. And he probably gets it filled for free because they probably has the oil field made a
Yeah.
deal that gets the oil for free.
Well, for anyone out there who is maybe dealing with a Nigerian owned aircraft over the next few weeks, I would just make sure you get those bills paid for fuel and services and catering, because who knows who's going to own it next week.
And check the maintenance logbooks.
I didn't even go there. But yeah,
Yeah.
probably different rules in different locations. So,
That is true.
well, cool. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up the pod today. We like to keep things short and sweet so that we get the fastest news in business aviation to you each week, that's easy to digest on your morning commute. Don't forget to subscribe to our weekly email digest in the show notes, and click follow wherever you get your podcasts. Comments and suggestions on what we should cover next are always welcome. So stay in touch, and we'll see you next time on the VIP seat.